As we go into this topic, I want to just set the scene a little bit and give you a little bit of information when it comes to the science behind how our brain functions. So the brain is lazy, and I know Yvonne doesn't like when I say this, so he's going to fight me on this, but the brain essentially is lazy. What do I mean by that? Is that anytime we go through a change, let's say you want to eat healthier, you want to, you want to exercise more, you want to start journaling, you want to start meditating, you want to start, I don't know, spending more time with your parents, for example. Maybe you want to wake up earlier. If you think about it, think of the last time you really wanted to make a change. Was it easy or was it not? The chances are it wasn't easy. And that's because change is an effort for our brains. And we kind of have this sort of reptile brain, right? Because it either seeks pleasure or avoids pain. And that's as far as our brain goes, if you think about it. So although we've evolved quite nicely as human species, our biology essentially is still the same. So this brain has this constant sort of awareness of anytime a change happens, it looks like threat to us. And so what happens is that if you want to wake up early in the morning, for example, an hour than you normally would, the first thing that comes to your mind is a bunch of excuses of why you should sleep an extra hour. That's just a protective mechanism that is embedded in us because change is an effort. And if you think about it, and based on research, 95% of actions that you do are unconscious. Right? So that means it has become such a habit and such a routine that you don't even think about it. Just think of when you wake up in the morning, if there was a little laser that would follow you around your house, I bet you those steps are the same. Maybe you wake up, maybe you go say hi to your kids, maybe you go drink water, maybe you go to the restroom. But the chances are it's quite the same because you have a routine that you follow. Or imagine when you're driving from home to work or work to home. You do it on autopilot, right? Without even realizing it. So in order for us to make the change, it's an effort, and B, in order for us to create habits that are so embedded that we don't think about them, they need to sometimes be replaced by new habits, right? So some of the old habits may not be serving us well. So if the old habit is not exercising, because that's a habit, right? That's itself as a habit. In order to create a new habit, we need to create new routines. All right, to make sure that the new habits are replacing habits that are not beneficial to us anymore. And the way we do this, the final point here, is by using research from neuroscience and on tricking the brain to say, this is a good change. I'm going to make sure you like this change, brain, and you're going to make it very easy for me to make the change. All right, and we're going to tell you exactly how to do this in this session.
Elena, what is quite controversial about the brain is also that the fact that all habits, if we have them and we want to change them, is because it gives us instant gratification. Sorry. Let's imagine, for instance, eating chocolate. It's instant gratification. So to change the fact that we're constantly eating chocolate, it is a continuous fight with something that gives us pleasure. So how can we do it to replace this old habit that is pleasurable with something that we must do, but it's more difficult to achieve? And that is the big question. So what I wanted to tell you is more about how do we drive change? And in order to explain you that, I want to drive you through some guy. His name is Benji Fogg, a professor in Stanford. He has been dealing for 20 years understanding how people change behaviors. And in his model, he says there are the three things that are important in order to drive change. One of them is motivation. The other one is the ability or capacity that we have to do the action. Is it hard to be done, or is it easy to be done? And the last thing that influences driving change is to have a trigger, like a reminder to do the action that we want to change. Now, what happens is that motivation is inconsistent. So you gave the example, Elena, about the story of going to the gym, and I have been there. So we go to the gym, we think that, okay, I will buy my subscription for 1 year. I'm going to meet my Serbian coach. He's going to kill me. And then after 3 weeks, I'm going to hate him and I'm going to drop my subscription. And I have paid a couple of thousands of dollars for my subscription and I'm dropping it. Motivation is inconsistent. The key question is, how do we make it easier. So that change happens. And what Benji Fogg has discovered that the bigger impact is made by the ability. It means that if it is something easy to be done, to start, to create this routine, you mentioned just before that 95% of the brain is the subconscious. So how do we put the new action in what we call the subconscious is by making it easier, creating routines, having consistency on making this routine will create a pathway in our neurons in order to store the new action in the long-term memory and not in the short-term memory. So 95% of our brain is subconscious. What do we have there? You said a couple of routines. We have everything that has been stored since we are 8 months old with rules that our parents have told us, beliefs from the society. So it is a dump for anything that has been anchored in our brain. So what we need to do is to create actions that are going to be stored in this long-term memory. It's not the short-term memory that we use, for instance, right now you are listening to me, you are going to store it in the 5% remaining. It's the cognitive part of our brain. This is long-term memory. Unless you do an action, no matter how short it is, and we will explain you a little bit more about how do we make very short, tiny actions. No, we need to make it so short, so small in order to start. Action is going to make it so that it is stored in the long-term memory. The third point is about the trigger. Not to forget that the triggers, it can be from two different sorts, two different types. One of them is a little bit like when we're hungry, our stomach is going to start rumbling, making funny noises. This is the internal triggers that we have, and the external triggers would be more like having an Outlook reminder, having my famous Trello where I write all of the actions that I must accomplish, something that will remind me. But very often the trigger is an action that we are already doing, an action that could be as simple as taking a coffee in the morning if you drink coffee, or going to brush your teeth. It is an action that can help us to remind us to do another action. Now, the big difference is, and I mentioned it before, is that we shouldn't be depending on motivation. Everything that is in the right side of this curve that you see that is called the activation threshold is something that will happen. We have the same level of motivation for doing. Let's imagine that you decide to have a balance between your private and your work life. The object itself, the action itself looks huge. We have the motivation to do it. But what if it becomes easier if we go into the area of the ability and we go into easier ways to do the same action in order to start? And we say, okay, I'm going to start with something that will take me maybe 1 minute per day to block a daily private time in my calendar. So in the middle of your working from home, constant demands from work, from your family, from your kid who wants help in the homework or whatsoever, you start taking 1 minute to block a time where you are going to block to have your private time. This is an action that is so small that anyone can do it. We always hear, Elena, this story about people who did amazing things just because they had high motivation. But listen, we are listening only about the 1% of people who achieve things. The 99% of people who achieve things are by being constant, by investing 1 minute at a time and building up a little bit like a compound interest that is growing every day. This 1% that at the end of the year will make 365% in order to achieve your goal. So, and this is what we don't hear. We always are crazy about certain stories that people who didn't have money suddenly became entrepreneurs, unicorns, or whatsoever. But we don't hear about this 99% of people who succeeded by doing little steps, right?
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting is that we always, I feel, looking for these quick wins and magic wands to say, how can I make this easier? How can I achieve? And this is it. Like if there was a magic wand, it's understanding of that understanding your brain, number one, and then creating processes that are easy for the brain, because motivation does not work. Again, if you just think of the last New Year's resolution you've had, or perhaps some of the examples that Yvonne has put up, this is it. Like it's very difficult to stay consistent, and two things that make you achieve in life is consistency and discipline. So how can you create processes that make it easier for you to do so? And that's what we're going to share moving forward now.
But I think that first we have a little bit of a question for everybody.
Yes. So if there's anything that prevents you from achieving your goals, what would that be? So you can scan. This is the last slide I will give you guys. So just scan the barcode right there and just plug it in. If there is anything that prevents you from perhaps achieving a particular goal, what would that be? Oh, I love these: laziness, my own thoughts, lack of time, availability, time to actually accomplish the goal. Yep. Laziness, I'm going to argue with that one. I don't believe anybody's really lazy. I think we're just setting maybe not the right goals, which we'll also discuss. So this is perfect. So overthinking and self-doubt, absolutely. I think that is something that we all struggle with at time. I can't get up an hour early in the morning because it's cold and I'm tired. I can relate. Perfectionism, absolutely. These things. Thank you guys for sharing. It's beautiful. Well, yeah, go ahead, Yvonne. You want to say something here?
Yes, when I look at this list, it looks like my personal list. Yes, that happens because we are humans. So anything that when we need to do change, and you mentioned it, Elena, it is about our brain gives signals of big changes, and then he puts himself in the area of being fear. Fear is made to protect us when we were Neanderthal people, to protect us, signaling that we need to escape, we need to run. So big changes gives exactly the same signals in the brain. So and it is made to protect us. So in order to go and do things, we need to trick the brain. And this is obviously, this list of things are the excuses that we create. This 5% of our brain creates, not knowing what the subconscious is really thinking. The subconscious is bombarded with enzymes of fear, and we create a post-rationalization saying, I cannot do it. I'm not good enough to do it. Or I need to be perfect. And then we start procrastinating. Procrastinating, overthinking, self-doubt are signals of fear. Perfectionism, saying, okay, maybe I have to wait until the right moment comes. It is also a signal of fear, a post-rationalization of fear. The only thing that works is if we are self-aware that we need to do the first step, the first action in order to move forward. Lack of time. Who doesn't have 1 or 2 minutes? And this is a trick. Let's get back to this model from this Beiji folk. He's quite an amazing guy. You heard also the podcast that he has is quite amazing. So how do we reduce action into the minimalistic version so that we start doing this action in small little chunks, so that we don't have the justification of lack of time, because anyone has 2 minutes or 5 minutes to devote in order to do the action. And this is what we are going to be discussing about. How do we drive the actions, knowing a couple of principles that of the brain. So we know one principle is that the reptilian part, this all part in our brain, the subconscious, where we are seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. There is another thing that is quite important, is that the brain has constant glasses. Reality and imagination are the same, in fact. if you imagine something, if you close your eyes and you visualize something with emotions where you're thinking about your family, the production of hormones for pleasure kick in the same way as you were living a reality. And this is something that is going to be quite useful, in fact, to replace self-motivation by the creation of these pleasure enzymes in order to keep on moving, imagining, visualizing where do we want to be in the future. And the last part is that it is easy to put in the long-term memory of our brain routines, something that is constantly repeated in the small little chunks. When you do 10 times, 20 times a small action, it becomes as good as what we have when we are driving a car. So we drive the car from home to the office without even thinking about it. We just realize that we landed, that our brain has already created a process to self-guide us. It is our subconscious that is taking over and guiding us towards the goal. And these are the three things that we are going to be doing in order to drive you to the process. Now, what is super important is that we're going to go into 6 steps, and I want your participation. Why? Because I want you to create your first tiny habit.
And what I've done, real quick, so what I've done is I've dropped a link. Everybody should see. It's a link to the workbook, so you can mention that as well. It's there. So what we want you to do is just to access this link that I just dropped in the chat box, open it, and you can either download it, use it right then and there, or you can just write it down if that's easier. So whatever works for you, but we're going to go through it and Yvonne will explain it. But I just want to make sure it's there. So you guys should all have it.
I should really quickly explain you what you see in the right side. In the right side of this slide, you see a habit tracker. By the way, you will have access to the habit tracker after this webinar. So the habit tracker is a tool. You remember that I was telling you about how do we realize and trick the brain that we are progressing. So we need to have self-awareness of our little progress when we have daily habits. So the option that you have is to track every time you are doing an action that is helping you, no matter how small it is, helping you towards your goal, and you have the possibility to track it and see the progress and congratulate yourself. Congratulate yourself when you achieve a strike of 5 times in a row doing an action. And that is super important for the brain. This part of saying, how do we push signals in our brain that says, we are happy, this is pleasure, I want to do it again. This is how we use the habit tracker. So we're going to drive you through the 6 steps. And I want to start with something that is quite the beginning of the story, in fact. How do we all have goals or aspirations? Let's imagine that we try to imagine the kind of person that we want to become. Let's say that in my particular case, I want to become the kind of person who is at ease and is never nervous or has less stress. That is a goal or aspiration. It's not an action. So we are not there yet. So, and I want you to spend some time to think about what could be a mini goal that you are an aspiration that you want to be. And it needs to start, I want to be the kind of person that 3 dots that starts learning data science, the kind of person who knows how to balance his life, private life with work, the kind of person who is much more productive, the kind of person who dares to speak in public, the kind of person who dares to speak out when there is a meeting at work. What would you like to be? I will give you a little bit of 1 minute to write one thing. Think about the thing that it matters for you today. Today that you are sitting at home or in the office, what type of person, choose what we all want to be, different type of person, but I want you to choose something that the first thing that comes to them to your mind. Write it down. And this is the time that where we go to the next slide, Elena. Right?
Yes, let's do it. Yeah, so hopefully you guys have step 1 done and you have the workbook so you can work with us as we go through it. So step 2 is let's look at exploring behavior options. So this is where you need to identify, okay, I have this goal, I have this aspiration because I want to become this person, etc. Right? Now you look at what are some of the behaviors. So for example, if you're a person who wants to be, more active and exercise or eat or be healthier, right? So maybe yoga in the morning is an option. Maybe it's just walking your dog, right? If you're looking to manage your stress a little bit better or be a little bit more productive, maybe you need to do something like playing some music or exercising before you go to bed, or maybe a stress relief activity for you is gardening. But be realistic with yourself because maybe it's none of those things would work. So you need to explore behavior options that work for you. So if you're a person who doesn't want to do gardening or doesn't relax when they listen to music, it will not work. So find what is it for you based on your aspiration. What are the behavior options available to you that are easy to implement, that are not very hard, that you know how to do, that you know how to get started with. So take a moment and write that down. What are the behavior options relevant to your aspirations?
My recommendation is go shoot for 3 options that will help you to achieve your aspiration. And be creative because life is short. Anything is possible.
Let's move to number 3 and let us know if you guys need a little bit of time, but hopefully it's enough. You can always revert back to it if you wanted to as well.
Okay, why I cannot go to the next slide? And yes, I can. I can now. So we were kind of crowdsourcing options. Like there are many options, but certain are not matching at all our lifestyle. So I want to get back to the example of my personal aspiration to be the kind of person who has less stress. And there is different options that we have seen in the step number 2, like doing yoga in the morning, walking the dog, and etc. But there are 2 questions that I need to ask myself. Does it help me to achieve my aspiration? Really? And can I get myself to do it? For instance, if it is about gardening, it will not help me. I'm a little bit useless with my hands, so it makes me even more stressed, Elena. Unfortunately, I'm not made to do some gardening, even though I have heard that so many people use it as a way to calm down and so on. Playing music, for instance, that's an option that I could have outsourced in the previous step, but maybe I need to learn first how to play music. I don't know how to play music. It makes it a little bit more difficult. So choose the one that that you can, that it really helps you with your aspirations, and at the same time you can make yourself go and do it. That there is time, that you don't need to spend so many resources. You don't need to pay as either money or either too much time. Choose out of the 3 that you crowdsource in the previous step, and choose the one, that only one that you can say, tomorrow I could do it. I will give you 1 minute to do that. So this type of behaviors after the crowdsourcing, we call them the golden behaviors, the ones that are easy to be done and really help us to reach our goal or aspiration.
It's the awkward radio silence.
That's incredible.
Alright.
And this is the time where we can go ahead with the next one, right?
Yes.
I
Just wanted
think
to
that.
give you guys some time to do this with us together. All right. So far we looked at the aspiration, what kind of person you want to become, crowdsourcing some of the behaviors, and then matching the behaviors to your lifestyle. The fourth step, this is where it becomes super important, is we need to start tiny. Tiny. All right. And what I mean tiny is, for example, if you want to start exercising and you've never exercised before, do I want you to go and sign up for 5 weeks, 5 days a week gym, or to go for an hour to the gym? No, because it will not work. Your body will say, no, oh no, it's not going to work for me. Let me just stop. But what you can do is say, let's say you're going to just do, I don't know, five push-ups every day, or maybe you go for a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute walk, right? So, or maybe after you finish brushing your teeth, for example, you are going to, I don't know, or maybe you're going to squat if you're that coordinated. I'm not, but whatever works for you. The idea is to start super tiny, that to where it sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. That's where the magic is. Don't buy it from us. What we're saying to you is based on research and a lot of research from really brilliant people, and it really does work. It's all about creating those tiny habits. So take a moment and think about how can you make this tiny habit. So some of the behaviors you've selected, how can you make sure they happen? What is the smallest piece that you can do that is applicable to you? Not what your neighbor can do, your brother, your sister, your wife, your husband, your kids, whatever. No, what is right for you? So take a moment here.
By the way, Elena.
Vivian said, both of you assume I can do 5 push-ups. Okay, Vivian, start with one. Start with one. Tiny. Start with one. Yeah, Ivan?
Yes, by the way, it made me think about the fact that, yes, for so many years, I have been trying to, I have tried to go to the gym. And I discovered like approximately 4 or 5 years ago that gym was not for me. So what I needed to do is to allocate the minimum possible time in order to do some exercise. We all know, in fact, all understand the reasons why it should be done. We understand that it's healthier. We want to live longer. We want to be there for our family. But despite that, we know the good reasons and we have the motivation, is not enough. So it makes approximately 5 years that I'm continuously doing the same routine that takes me between 5 to 10 minutes every day. 5 to 10 minutes every day, and I have been doing it and I haven't stopped. And just for the sake of my health, I'm not doing more. In certain scale of your micro habits can come, but if you don't feel ready to do it, it is better to continuously do the minimum possible than stopping and having the regrets. So I have been keeping myself healthy only with my 5 or 10 minutes of gymnastics.
Absolutely. And hopefully you guys broke it down to tiny habits, tiny habits. So let's move on to number 5, how we can incorporate these.
And this is where the slide is a little bit resistant, rebellious. Okay, so this is about finding your triggers, something that is going to remind you to do the action, the new action, this tiny habit that you have created. Let's say that you have decided to create, like, I want to learn about data science as of today, but nobody has the time to read one book of data science per month. It's a little bit boring, by the way. I tried it, but I wasn't successful. But what if you decided to have the possibility to read 2 pages per day, just 2 pages? So you need to find a trigger that will remind you to read these 2 pages every single day. So for instance, a trigger might be an action that you are doing recurrently. So I gave before the example about drinking a cup of coffee, brushing your teeth, or maybe you have a routine just before going to bed, like me, either of putting things in the side of the bed. And this is something that you can use, for instance, or I have personally used, is to say, can I use this existing routine of putting my clothing in the side of the bed as a trigger to remind me to go and open the book and do the 2 pages that I have promised myself? Can I use something that I do continuously? Let's say whenever you go to the office and the first thing that you do is to turn on your laptop as a signal to do an action that I have promised myself, like for instance, creating more empathy with my direct reports. As soon as I turn on my laptop to think about the new action that I want to do, is that which could be spend 1 minute chatting just personal with one of my direct reports. 1, 2 minutes, that's it. So what could be the type of triggers that you can use in order to do your action? It needs to be in a moment where you can, where there is no friction, in fact, so that you don't have maybe if you want to read, obviously you cannot read while kids are running around. You cannot read in the middle of a workshop at work. So when could be the right moment, the right action that you recurrently do in order to start a new behavior? I will give you just 30 seconds because that is a quite easy story. If you think about it, we are people of routines. So in average, a person has around 30 different routines per day that we do constantly without noticing. So out of the 30, you will find something that is going to act as a trigger to do your new action. This is great. We move on.
All right, yes. And the final part here, and then we're going to show you a quick giveaway that we're going to share with you guys as well. The final part here is that we need to make time to celebrate. Our brain likes celebration. It likes the reward system. So we need to make time to celebrate. This is where, when we send you guys, we'll share with you the habit tracker. When you see that you've checked off like 1 week worth of habits, make a moment and celebrate. Like, it can be as simple as having a cup of coffee or treating yourself to a massage, or maybe you want to order yourself that thing that you've been trying, that's been in your wish list on Amazon. Whatever it is, it doesn't need to be big or anything like significant. It can be as simple as just acknowledging the fact that, wow, looking at it, you're like, wow, I have done 7 days in a row of this particular habit, because it gives that reward to your brain to then keep going for the next 7 days and next 7 days and onwards. And the important part is that even if you fall off and there's 1 day that you skip, the point is to get right back into it, even if you do skip it. So don't be too harsh on yourself in that sense. But as you're crossing those days off in your habit tracker, once you reach like a week or 10 days, it's up to you how you want to do it, make a moment to celebrate. And the question that people often ask us is, how long does it take to create a habit? And there's a lot of research and everybody says different things. Somebody will say 21 days, somebody say 30 days. A popular one is 66 days because they're saying this is how long it takes for it to become subconscious. What I can tell you is that when you think about how much you pay attention to your current habits, probably not much, because they became so automated and you've been doing them forever and ever. So the idea is to do it, and the likelihood is if it's a habit you want to keep, you're going to do it forever. That's what makes it a habit. So, but of course, the longer you do it, the more easier it becomes. So, and that will depend on the intensity, on how difficult it is, what kind of process you put aside. So there's no particular sort of timeline in that sense. But of course, I mean, you can take an average of everything I said, and 30 days could be a good starting point, right? But the idea is to keep going, because a habit is going to become part of your routine. So eventually you're not even going to count it. How long until it becomes automated, it depends on you. So, but always make time to celebrate.
We underestimate, in fact, the power of celebration. And I mentioned before that it is about faking to the brain that something real is happening. So this action, for instance, in particular, I just want to share with you. So every time that I do and that I'm using my tracker, I have a tendency to do like this. And that's, for me, is an act of celebration when I succeed to do an action that has been recurrent, and that produces this happiness, this pleasure that I have in my brain, and this is the incentive to continue, is until it becomes kind of addictive to do this. I'm going to be looking every morning to do this, and this action is going to be anchored inside of my brain.